Welcome back to another deep dive. We spend a massive portion of our waking hours just navigating choices.
Oh, constantly, every single day.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we buy products, we subscribe to services, we vote, we align ourselves with certain corporate philosophies, and we generally prefer to think that we're in total conscious control of those decisions.
Which is a nice thought.
Right, it's a comforting thought. But today, we're pulling back the curtain on the invisible war that's being waged for the single most valuable, highly contested real estate on Earth, which is your mental real estate. We are examining the architecture of brand positioning.
And I think it's crucial to realize right up front that the battlefield for market dominance, it isn't on a store shelf or, a server farm. It is entirely biological. It takes place inside the human mind, and it's fighting against some really severe neurological limits.
Absolutely. So our mission today, for you, the listener, is to understand how certain brands manage to bypass our critical filters. How do they hack our brains to become our default choices? We're going to map out how the rules of this psychological game have fundamentally shifted since the foundation of modern marketing in the 1970s, and most importantly, how you can actually cut through today's massive media clutter.
Which is thicker than ever.
Thicker than ever, exactly.
Oh.
And to set the tone for this, the source material we're exploring today is a comprehensive white paper by Brian Fabiano. It's called Positioning Revisited. And it opens with this really striking visual metaphor.
Oh, the leaf. I love this part.
Right. So picture a high-contrast black and white close-up of a striped leaf. The image is really dark, it's highly textured, almost moody, feels visually crowded. But right there, sitting on the ridges of the leaf, are these perfectly illuminated, crystal-clear water droplets.
Yeah, and that image really just captures the modern challenge perfectly. Because we live in an environment that is deeply shadowed, overwhelmingly crowded, and frankly, it's exhausting to navigate. Every single day, thousands of messages are trying to blend into your visual and auditory field.
Just constant static.
Exactly. So the question for anyone trying to communicate an idea, whether you're selling a product or pitching an idea, is how to become that perfectly clear water droplet. How do you create a contrast so sharp and a message so singular that the brain simply cannot ignore it?
Okay, let's unpack this, because to understand the mechanics of becoming that water droplet, we really have to look at the era before anyone actually understood the science of the consumer's mind.
The dark ages of advertising.
Basically, yeah. Prior to 1972, the advertising industry operated a lot like the Wild West. Agencies relied heavily on direct response tactics, long feature lists, catchy television jingles, and, just creative hunches.
A lot of guesswork.
A ton of guesswork. The prevailing strategy was output over outcome. A company would run this massive, incredibly expensive campaign, and if sales didn't move, the agency would just sort of reclassify the failure. They'd say, oh, well, it was an image-building campaign rather than a direct sales push.
Right. There was very little accountability because there wasn't a framework for understanding how a message actually seeded itself in the brain. It was a scattergun approach. You kind of just threw money at a wall and hoped a tiny fraction of it stuck.
But that paradigm fractured entirely in the spring of 1972.
It really did.
Jack Trout and Al Rees published a series of articles in Advertising Age magazine, and they titled it The Positioning Era. And they followed that up with two books that became absolute landmarks in the business world: Positioning, The Battle for Your Mind, and The 22 Immutable Laws of Marketing.
Yeah.
And the material we're analyzing today literally refers to these publications as the stone tablets brought down from Mount Sinai. I mean, they established the immutable laws of modern communication.
What's fascinating here is the specific paradigm shift Trout and Rees forced onto the entire industry. Because before them, companies believed positioning was something you did to a product.
Like physically changing it.
Exactly. You changed the packaging, you lowered the price, you tweaked the ingredients, and you called it positioning. Trout and Rees came along and articulated that positioning has absolutely nothing to do with the product itself.
Right.
Positioning is the mechanism of manipulating what happens inside the mind of the prospect. It is the act of claiming one of the very few available mental slots in a society that is already completely over-communicated.
And they provided fact-based, actionable guidance on how to secure that prime mental space. To demonstrate just how durable this brain branding really is, we're going to run through a rapid word association exercise straight from the text.
This is a great exercise.
It is. So I'm going to list 8 prompts, and I want you, the listener, to just observe the automatic response your brain generates for each category. Don't overthink it, just see what pops up. Ready?
Let's do it.
Soup, right? TV viewer research?
Nielsen.
G-rated movies?
Disney,
athletic shoes,
Nike,
ketchup,
Heinz,
coffee,
Starbucks,
jeans,
the Levi's,
and lastly, tires.
Goodyear or Firestone.
Exactly. The neurological response there is almost entirely involuntary for anyone living in a Western consumer market.
It really is. It's an automatic reflex.
The baseline expectation is that your brain instantly fired off Campbell's, Nielsen, Disney, Nike, Heinz, Starbucks, Levi's, and Goodyear. And the author of our text notes that he's run this exact sequence with hundreds of professionals across various industries, and the reactions are universally identical.
And that uniformity illustrates a highly critical biological function. The brain consumes a massive amount of metabolic energy just to keep us alive. Whenever it can create a shortcut to save energy, it absolutely will.
It's lazy by design.
By evolutionary design, yeah. But this level of brain branding isn't achieved through just a clever slogan or a quick celebrity endorsement. Nike didn't permanently alter our cultural consciousness simply because Michael Jordan wore a swoosh. A celebrity can buy attention, sure, but attention is temporary.
Right. If celebrity endorsement equated to permanent positioning, our mental landscape would shift every single time a new athlete signed a shoe contract. But the mind just doesn't work that way.
No, true branding is the cumulative long-term effect of a product consistently living up to its promise in the buyer's actual experience. Marketing simply introduces the concept. The reliable, repeated fulfillment of the promise is what locks it into consciousness.
It creates a habit.
Exactly. When a brand delivers on its specific promise over and over, the brain converts that brand into a habit. It becomes a permanent shortcut. You no longer stand there evaluating the condiment aisle. Your brain bypasses the decision-making process entirely and directs your hand toward the Heinz bottle just to conserve cognitive energy.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though, because the material provides a literal masterclass on how a brand identifies an empty slot in the brain and custom builds a shortcut to fill it. Let's examine the historical battlefield of the grocery store's frozen food aisle.
Oh, the frozen food wars of the 1980s. They are the perfect laboratory for understanding positioning.
They really are. At the time, Stouffer's essentially owned the top tier of that market. They had aggressively claimed the premium or gourmet slot in the consumer's mind. When shoppers wanted a high-end frozen dinner, their brains automatically defaulted to Stouffer's.
And once a brand occupies a specific mental slot like premium, a competitor cannot simply launch a product and claim they are the new premium option. The brain rejects conflicting information to avoid cognitive dissonance. The slot is occupied. The resident cannot be easily evicted.
Recognizing this biological roadblock, Lean Cuisine entered the market not by fighting Stouffer's for the premium slot, but by creating a new category entirely. They claimed the diet gourmet position. So the consumer's mind expanded to accommodate two distinct shortcuts, one for indulgent gourmet and one for calorie-conscious gourmet.
But the strategic genius came from the brand that analyzed this newly formed landscape and asked where the remaining void was. They looked for the hole in the mind of the marketplace.
And the hole existed right between the standard budget lines and those premium gourmet lines. Consumers desired an elevated experience that didn't carry the premium price tag of a Stouffer's. The solution was the introduction of a brand literally named Budget Gourmet.
They observed the void and built their entire brand architecture to fit precisely into that empty space. They didn't attempt to convince the public they were the absolute highest quality food available. They accepted the prospect's perceptions as reality and mapped their brand attributes directly to the consumer's existing desire.
This highlights a profound rule of positioning. You cannot force a brand to be what you, the creator, want it to be. You have to locate a time, a place, or need where audiences aren't getting what they want and mold your message to fit their reality.
And when you execute that strategy effectively, you build an asset of unparalleled resilience. Physical infrastructure is fragile. Founders pass away, corporate offices burn down, machinery degrades, and technological advantages become obsolete in a matter of months.
Or weeks these days.
True, but a brand that has successfully secured mental real estate endures through all of it. It remains the only sound foundation for profitable long-term growth.
But securing that real estate is becoming exponentially more difficult due to the hardwired limitations of human biology. And here's where we venture into the realm of neuromarketology, which the text defines as the study of marketing's direct physiological effect on the brain. The research reveals a severe limitation in how human beings categorize their choices.
We tend to view ourselves as highly nuanced thinkers capable of weighing dozens of variables at once. But the neurological reality is far more restrictive.
Scientific research indicates that there are only 5 basic positions a brand can reliably occupy in the human brain when a consumer is making a purchasing decision. Just 5. The material compares this dynamic to a game of positioning poker, where the deck only contains 5 distinct cards.
These 5 positions represent the absolute limits of what the human mind finds readily believable. If you attempt to invent a 6th category or present a promise outside these parameters, the brain processes the message as static and filters it out entirely.
Let's map out these 5 cards for you, examining the classic brand examples that define each position. Card number 1 is best.
Hertz dominates this position. Their historical positioning statement was a masterclass in simplicity. We're number 1. By claiming the absolute top of the hierarchy, they appealed to the brain's desire for the safest, most vetted choice.
Card number 2 is niche.
Apple Computer is the textbook execution of the niche strategy. With their Think Different campaign, they actively alienated the mainstream corporate buyer.
On purpose?
Entirely on purpose. They positioned themselves exclusively as the tool for the creative, the rebel, the visionary. By narrowing their focus, they intensified the loyalty of their specific target market.
Card number 3 is first.
Levi's owns this slot. Their promise, the genuine article, signals to the brain that they invented the category. The psychological implication is that every other brand is merely an imitation. The brain naturally respects origin and longevity.
Card number 4 is
Against?
or contrast.
7-Up brilliantly executed this by branding themselves as the Uncola. They completely defined their existence by what they were not. They avoided fighting Coca-Cola and Pepsi on their own terms, instead offering a clear, contrasting alternative that carved out its own unique mental slot.
And the final card, number 5, is combination.
FedEx represents the apex of the combination strategy, merging first and against. Their foundational promise, when it absolutely, positively has to be there overnight, established them as the first to guarantee overnight delivery, while sharply contrasting against the notoriously slow and unreliable postal alternatives of the era.
Best, niche, first, against, combination. That is the entire permissible spectrum of brand positioning.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the severe biological bottleneck dictates why narrowing a brand's focus down to a single, easily digestible promise is completely non-negotiable. The white paper issues a really stark warning on this front. If your marketing campaign is highly effective, the prospect will remember exactly one thing about your product. One thing.
Right. And if a company challenges the consumer to remember more than one attribute, say claiming to be the highest quality and the lowest price and the most innovative, they induce immediate cognitive friction.
The brain evaluates that multifaceted claim, recognizes the contradictory nature of high quality and low price, experiences sensory overload, and simply discards the entire message. You blur the positioning, and the prospect's mind instantly reverts to a competitor's established shortcut to resolve the confusion.
Understanding the limitations of these 5 cards was crucial in 1972, but applying them in the modern landscape requires an entirely different level of tactical execution. To illustrate how drastically the playing field has shifted, the author shares this fun, nostalgic anecdote about growing up in the 1970s and watching the sitcom Bewitched.
Oh, I remember this.
Yeah, his favorite character wasn't Samantha the Witch. It was her husband, Darren Stevens, who worked as an account executive at an advertising agency. Every episode, Darren would conjure up one big idea for a print ad or a television spot, presented on a storyboard, and boom, he saved the day.
It's an appealing fantasy for sure, but it represents a vastly simpler era of communication. Delivering a positioning message in the 1970s was a relatively linear process.
A brand essentially bought television spots on one of the 3 major networks, placed print ads in a few dominant magazines, and ran some radio commercials. There were roughly 6 major outlets for mass messaging. A marketer essentially had a 1 in 6 chance of placing their message in front of the correct demographic.
The mathematics of modern marketing are entirely divorced from that reality. Even the 20th anniversary edition of Trout and Reese's work acknowledged a shifting landscape, but the last decade has seen an absolute explosion of delivery channels. The 1 in 6 paradigm is totally dead.
Today, the options for delivering marketing communications include email, SMS text, integrated proximity devices, social marketing across dozens of fragmented platforms, blogging networks, cloud infrastructure, and highly localized digital targeting. New avenues for accessing hyper-specific audiences are engineered faster than most corporate structures can even adapt to them.
We have transitioned from a 1 in 6 probability to facing upward of 50 distinct primary channel options. You now have a 1 in 50 chance of placing your message correctly on the first attempt. The material explicitly compares the odds of achieving spontaneous marketing success today to rolling the dice at a craps table.
And when you factor those 50 base options against varying messaging styles and splintered demographic profiles, the permutations reach into the thousands. It becomes mathematically obvious why billions of dollars are vaporized annually by companies chasing the wrong trends. Even within a seemingly uniform demographic, say 30-something professionals living in a specific zip code, the psychological variance is massive. We are attempting to categorize infinite, highly unpredictable human minds using a rigidly expanding technological framework.
It's a daunting task.
So, what does this all mean? If the odds are stacked so heavily against visibility and the media environment is an absolute chaos of splintered attention, how does a brand prevent its message from becoming white noise?
This strategic answer requires recognizing that while the technological platforms have mutated, the biological solution remains constant. Success in this environment relies entirely on the strict execution of neuromarketology principles through what the text defines as the 4 rights. Amidst all the clutter, you must simultaneously connect with the right audience, using the right message, at the right timing, in the right place.
The 4 rights. It sounds deceptively simple in theory, but executing that matrix across modern channels while restricting yourself to just one of the 5 positioning cards is a monumental logistical challenge.
It requires advanced technological infrastructure paired with highly disciplined strategic thinking. Let's analyze the friction points. You might have perfectly identified your target audience and crafted a brilliant message utilizing the against card. But if your timing relies on passive social media scrolling rather than an active proximity network when the consumer is actually near the point of purchase, the message fails. If you miss on even one of the 4 rights, the positioning simply will not burn its way into the neurological pathways of the prospect. The cognitive shortcut is never formed.
It is a relentless, ongoing battle for clarity. Let's trace the arc of everything we've explored today. We began by examining the foundational shift in 1972, when Trout and Rees established that positioning is not a physical alteration of a product, but a psychological maneuver entirely confined within the mind of the consumer.
And we saw the practical application of that theory in the frozen food wars, observing how Budget Gourmet successfully identified and occupied a precise void between established market tiers, rather than fighting an unwinnable battle against entrenched competitors.
We analyzed the biological constraints of neuromarketology, learning that the human brain only possesses the capacity to accept 5 rigid positioning cards: best, niche, first, against, or combination. Finally, we contrasted the linear 1 in 6 media landscape of the 1970s with the highly fragmented 1 in 50 crapshoot of modern media, underscoring the absolute necessity of aligning the 4 rights to cut through the static.
Absorbing the sheer scale of this psychological and technological matrix can be intimidating, but understanding the underlying mechanics provides a massive structural advantage.
It shifts the perspective from simply hoping for attention to engineering a permanent mental habit, which brings the focus directly back to you, the listener. Evaluate your current professional trajectory, your business model, or the way you present your ideas in a crowded marketplace. Which of the 5 positioning poker cards are you actively playing? Are you attempting to claim the best position in an oversaturated field? Are you carving out a hyper-specific niche? Are you positioning yourself against the legacy systems in your industry? And most critically, are you diluting your impact by attempting to play 3 contradictory cards at the same time? Identify your optimal position, strip away the excess messaging, and execute that single card relentlessly.
This raises an important question, a concept that builds directly on the friction between technology and biology we've been discussing. The data clearly shows that our media options, our digital channels, and the sheer volume of daily messaging are exponentially exploding. The clutter doubles continuously, yet the principles of neuromarketology prove that the physical capacity of the human brain remains entirely static. We are still hardwired to only process those 5 basic categories.
The technological noise is scaling infinitely, but our biological bandwidth hasn't changed in thousands of years.
Exactly the point of tension. If the external clutter continues to multiply, but our internal capacity to process it remains permanently capped, will future communication strategies eventually be forced to abandon traditional media entirely? To secure that increasingly elusive mental real estate, will the positioning of tomorrow have to integrate directly into our physical environments, or perhaps interface directly with our neurology, simply to bypass the overwhelming sensory overload of screens and feeds? It is a complex, slightly unsettling vision of where the battle for the mind is heading next. it is certainly something to chew on.
A fascinating threshold to consider as the tools of communication continue to evolve. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the hidden architecture of the mind and the invisible forces that shape our choices. We value the opportunity to explore these complex systems with you, decoding the strategies operating just below the surface of our daily lives. Until next time, continue analyzing the signals around you, keep searching for the unaddressed voids in your own industry, and always remember the power of playing a single card with absolute clarity. Take care.